Welcome to the What's Your Weird Story podcast.
Everyone has at least one good story.
And some of us have stories that are just to the left of normal.
We're interested in the ones that push the boundaries of what we can perceive.
Stories that defy explanations.
Stories with an air of mystery.
Stories we might not share
for fear of being thought of differently.
But don't worry, we're all friends here. So, what's your weird story? Hi, welcome to the What's Your Weird Story podcast. It's me, once again, Adam Beebe, and with my co-host, Barry Johnston.
Hello.
We are here. This is our second episode. It's very exciting.
Can't believe it's already been the second one, man.
I know, dude. We've been working on these things behind the scenes for a while, and we've had a lot of fun doing that. And we've had a lot of people that have been working with us, and we appreciate all their help. So it's great to finally get these coming out.
Yeah, really coming along nice and smooth, and the stories have been pretty cool so far. So I'm looking forward to the rest.
Yeah, we got some really cool stuff coming up for sure. But today, Barry, today's interesting because we're kind of like both of our stories are based around our hometown.
Yeah, we're taking a trip back. Taking back home.
Yeah, we're going back to Kingfisher, Oklahoma, and we're talking to you. You're going to tell that UFO story you alluded to last time when we were talking to Metis.
Yeah, and what's crazy is when you start telling these stories, sometimes you'll start remembering more and more of the details, which is kind of cool because it's been something that's sitting in the back of the brain for so long.
Yeah, man, definitely. You dust it off and you find some other stories back there in the old hard drive of the brain,
right.
As it were. And so it's been a lot of fun, and we've been talking off air, and we've got a lot of cool stuff coming down the line. So just as a reminder and as a kind of introductory thing, and to get to know us better, kind of a deal. Barry and I grew up in Kingfisher, Oklahoma, born and raised. And it's a small town of probably, I would say, when we were living there, it was probably about like 4,000 maybe, if that.
I was going to say 4,000-ish, maybe at the height, maybe 5,000 during the oil boom. But
it may be 5 now, but definitely when we were there, it was, and also probably, 500 or so of that 1,000, maybe even a whole 1,000 of it was people that lived outside of town in the country, like yourself.
Yeah, right, correct. Yeah, we lived 3 miles north of town, so that was you had one place to go to school. You had the next two towns were equal distance, 9-10 miles down the road. So,
yep.
Yeah,
we were the big town too. We were the big city of Kingfisher County, man.
Yeah, it's amazing.
We had a movie theater.
That's right.
It had one. We had one screen.
That had since burnt down.
Yeah, dude, that broke my heart whenever I heard that. So, well, they reopened that other version of it, but
it's not the same. I mean, it's a lot nicer.
I'm sure it is.
But you kind of like the old nostalgic, the 89er theater.
Yes. Yeah. Well, my mom went to see movies there when she was a little girl.
That's amazing.
It's crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah, it was a great little town to grow up in. Very, I guess, like a Norman Rockwell painting on the most part. You looked around and everything was safe and quiet, peaceful.
Clean little town.
Very clean little town, but weird things happened. When you're young, you don't really know about a lot of these things too much, but sometimes they occur, and it leads you to have some stories.
I always thought when I was a kid growing up that it's very normal around here. You know what I mean? Like, my family's boring. Life is somewhat mundane.
Yep.
But looking back, man, it was kind of a neat place to grow up, and we were subjected to just as much of oddities as anyone else in the world.
Yeah. that leads us perfectly to our stories here for our second episode. And first, we have Jessica, who was a couple years younger than us in school, but she's joined us and she's called in and she's got a story of a mysterious stranger. And then we also we have you got one of your stories for us.
Yes.
And I'm excited to hear. So without further ado, Jessica, what's your weird story?
Okay, so this happened when I was about 13, 14. I don't even think I was in high school yet. And my mom and my dad and my brother and I were all at home when it was either a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon, which is weird in and of itself because, my dad was always so busy with stuff on the farm and taking care of animals and crops and all of that. And I don't know if either of you ever went to my parents' house, but it's about a mile off of Highway 81. And it is not the first house that you see when you come off the highway. And in fact, it isn't even visible from the highway. And that's important. That's why I'm telling you that.
Okay.
Gotcha, yep.
So everyone who ever came to my parents' house, whether it was a friend or family member, or even like the UPS guy, would come to the back door. So if somebody came to the front door, they were selling something, they were lost, or they were Jehovah's Witnesses wanting to tell us about Jesus. So the doorbell rings, and I answered it, and there was a lady who was probably about as old as I am now. And she told me that she was traveling on foot and wanted to know if we had any food or money for her. Huh. So, I thought that was weird for lots of reasons like I just shared. And so I went and talked to my mom. And my mom found some money. My dad found some crackers. And I handed them to the lady and she said, "Thank you." And she walked away. And I could see by this tree that was near the road, one of those, like the little cart things like you sometimes see homeless people have.
Yeah.
And she had like a bag and all of that. And so she left, and I told my dad what had happened. And he and I both just thought that was, just kind of strange. Because once you turn onto that highway, there is a house right past the railroad track.
Right.
And you can see that house from the highway. And if someone needed help, that would have been the first house that they would have gone to. So it would probably take 4 or 5 minutes to get from where my parents' house was to the highway. You look out the window and she is gone.
Whoa.
Yeah.
She disappeared.
She disappeared.
Whoa.
I'm convinced it was an angel.
How?
Wow.
How much time had lapsed? Like, there she.
Well, my dad and I went out onto the porch, like a minute later, and you couldn't even see her walking down the road.
Wow.
She was gone. Like, she just vanished from existence.
I've heard similar stories, and growing up, especially growing up as we did in small town and being very church active. And, and Barry and I, we grew up in the Methodist church, and you hear stories about something like that where a stranger comes, and even in the Bible, there's stories where a stranger appears and asked for, for mercies, for help, for, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and, people, either turned them away or didn't. And that's kind of how it was, and that sounds like it definitely very well could have been because of the, either that or like, I don't know. She was maybe she was abducted by aliens.
She would have gone across the bridge and gone further away from the highway, but if you're traveling, it seems to me that you would be on a major.
Can we also say that like the part of the world that we grew up in is pretty rural and there wasn't a whole lot of homeless people? You know what I mean?
I think that's important because I don't ever remember seeing any homeless people.
No. I don't.
No, not
the
at all.
first time I saw a homeless person is in 1988 when my mom and dad took me and my sisters to Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first time I'd never saw a homeless person in Oklahoma City, at least that I remember.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just where we grew up. It was very...
No, and I mean, I remember going with my mom to the Jesus House to take donations when I was a kid in downtown Oklahoma City. So I knew there were homeless people, but...
Right.
Yeah.
You know, where we grew up and being that far off the highway, not the first house.
That's crazy.
How far off the highway did you say it was again?
Almost a mile.
Gosh.
If you...
Good Lord.
When you are heading toward Okarche, and you can turn to the right and go toward Meeker Addition, you went toward the left and crossed the railroad track. That was the road to my mom and dad's house.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
no
crazy.
one else in my family remembers this story. I was talking to my mom about it maybe a year or so ago, and she's like, I don't remember that.
Wow.
But I answered the door. I saw her. I gave her money. I gave her some food. But I'm the only one who remembers seeing her.
Wow.
What time of year was this?
I think it was probably in the winter, maybe January, February, because that would be more likely that my dad would have been home and not out farming.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, that's what I was wondering. So.
Because I think I remember her wearing like a coat and maybe a stocking hat.
Wow.
And that's another thing is it gets cold in Oklahoma, and especially in the winter. And you don't do a lot of walking around in the country in general, but you especially don't do it with the wind in the winter like that.
With a cart.
Just traveling. Yeah, with a cart.
Like one of those little carts. You're not going to be doing that.
That is
wow.
Yeah.
That is crazy, man.
Mm-hmm.
That is.
And so, I mean, obviously there's no way to know who she was or if I imagined her or anything like that. But, I mean, I was probably about 13 and I'm 40 now and I still remember it.
Wow. So has anything, I mean, in connection with that, do you feel like there was any kind of like, I don't know, do you feel any like a benevolence or something good, or, did good things happen, anything kind of like that afterwards? Or was it just like this mysterious moment and there was like no causality or no effect? It was just, it happened.
It was just kind of a mysterious moment. I mean, I think being a Christian, I think I'm drawn to being generous and giving to others, but yeah, I think that was just one of those weird things that happened.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yes.
Hey, Barry, you know what we need?
What's that?
We need all our friends and listeners to go and rate and review us the highest possible of all those things on all their podcast providers. iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, whatever. You know them all. You listen to them all, or at least one of them. So please go. Give us all the stars, all the thumbs up, all the hearts, all the love, great reviews, so we can grow our audience and more people can add and contribute to not only the stories, but to the listening and being part of this huge community that we are going to build. That's what we need.
Okay, so this story takes place. I'm thinking I'm about 12 or 13 years old, and my dad and I are driving out to our house, and we lived 3 miles out of town. So there's a little bit of time between the time you come out of the town and the light pollution, and you get out.
Oh yeah. You were in the. Yeah. You were in an addition. It was a housing addition but it was still country. I always considered, that you lived in the country, even though
country. Yeah, definitely. So let me just lay the background here so people understand that my dad is probably one of the most conservative, straight-laced, a lot of frills. He's got a great sense of humor, but I'm just saying that he's very straight-laced and sort of not he's not necessarily going to be the first guy that's going to admit to something of the sort of unidentified object flying overhead.
Very down to earth, very pragmatic, very,
yes, very. Yeah. So anyway, we're driving, and we see over the highway this thing that is hovering above the road. I'm talking like maybe 30 to 40 feet over the road. And it has these sort of lights that are, they're not pulsating, but there's something that is kind of like mesmerizing about it. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Maybe it's the fact that there's something floating above the road. I don't know. But my dad slows down and he rolls the windows down, and we're going at a crawl, dude. We're maybe 5 miles an hour on a major highway, and it's totally silent. And we stop almost a little bit before we're directly under the object, okay? So we're both looking up out of our own windows up into the sky, and we're trying to figure out what the hell this thing is, man.
Right.
It's fairly large. It's like... It's the size of like a fairly large living room. And so, yeah.
Was there any discernible shape to it?
It looked round. It looked roundish. Okay. It was kind of hard to tell. But so what we did was, this thing where we lived, there was a creek. And the creek runs along the side, sort of, not the side of the road, but it's parallel sort of to the road. And so as we're driving home, we start driving home as this thing starts to move over the wooded creek. Mm-hmm. And as we're driving home, it's like just creeping over the creek. And so this is in the days when we didn't have cell phones. And
right.
So we get home, and my dad picks up the phone. It's probably 9 o'clock at night. Calls the sheriff's department and asks them if they could see or if they know of any aircraft in the area. They report there's nothing on the radar. Nothing's been reported as, coming through the area. And we sat there and we watched that thing out over the creek for probably a good 5 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. And then it just was gone.
So wait, so you went underneath, you're driving home.
Yep.
You went underneath.
Yep.
You went there. Then you went home.
Yeah. When it started creeping to the wooded area is when we started going home. So we stopped there in the road. It stood there. It started to go over the wooded area. So we started to go home because it was going to where if we turned down our road, we could kind of follow it as it's going parallel to the road. And then we sat there.
So that would be east.
That would be east.
Okay.
Yes. And I'm telling you, man, it was probably a good 5 minutes that we sat there, and we were just both like, I don't know what to say right now, right? So it leaves, and then, so I don't know if I even told anybody about that. I had to have told some people, but about 5 years ago, I went to my dad and I asked him, I said, Dad, because we never talked about it ever again.
Right.
I don't know. I think he probably woke up the next day and was like, that didn't happen. You know what I mean? But I asked him about 5 years ago, do you remember that? And he goes, yes. He's like, I do remember that. And he's like, I don't know what that was. And I'm like, because a child's mind sometimes can be...
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But to hear him say, yes, I do remember that, made me think that...
a child's mind is
crazy.
Definitely more... The imagination is more ignitable.
Absolutely.
It can be set off and it can make something, happen. It can make literally make a mountain out of a molehill.
Absolutely.
With imagination that we lose as we grow older. But yeah, that's even still though at the cusp of teen years. That's still that's wild, and it is just unusual that you both experienced it and then you just kind of put it to the side. I mean, it's just you saw it and Just didn't talk about it because I wonder. I guess it's just because you couldn't process.
I guess so.
You know, your dad couldn't process it. He was an adult, and you know, and even maybe pointing it out to you and bringing it back up to you, you know, who couldn't process it. Maybe he thought that, you know, it would scare you or you know, and anything like that. So, did you see, because you lived so far out of town? Did you see other things, like, you know, did you see other things in the sky? You know, no, I mean you saw, that was a pretty intense.
Yeah, I mean,
episode.
we would see airplanes and, you know, the occasional helicopter, you know, but it wasn't like what was so strange, I guess, about it was the fact that it was so silent, man. I mean, there was not a fucking peep coming out, dude. Not a peep. And that was what was so eerie, man. It was like, how is this thing staying above us, but there's no sound? You know? Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know, man. I can't explain it.
Wild.
I can't.
It's wild. That's wild. And you know, I don't think I've ever heard you talk about that.
I probably never told you. I don't even know why I would. I don't know why I wouldn't have. But I don't know. It's just so weird. It's one of those things that I think I might have thought people might think I'm crazy if I talk about.
Well, yeah. So, and that's all. You know, the great thing about that is you know, that point there is exactly why we're doing this.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So that people can tell these crazy things that have happened to them
for sure,
without necessarily having people think they're crazy, or at least letting, you know, telling to people who want to hear these stories.
Sure.
And they're like, you're like, hey, you might be crazy, but we are too.
Of course. It's like, hey man, I've experienced something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And even if it is bullshit, like if it comes out to be like, oh, you know, it was this or this, was like, yeah, but you know what, man, it was kind of fun, like thinking about, like, hey, maybe this is going on. You know, maybe there's something else going on that I can't explain. And for the longest time, I couldn't explain it, you know? So.
And there's the element of just uncertainty and mystery is something that, you know, compels us as humans in our existence. Mm-hmm. Because we want to know, and when we're confronted by that which we can't know or that we don't, you know, we either search for the answer or we ignore it, or we try to we're always trying to put a framework on everything, so we can understand it.
Try to explain it in a way that makes sense, and sometimes you dumb it down so that it makes sense. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you soften it up so it's like, oh well, it was because of this, you know. But in reality, it's like, dude, you know, when it's happening that it's not normal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you know, we have all these different filters, these different lenses to look to, you know, to try and make these things understand, with science and with cultural norms and religion and all these things that we try to like frame it up so that we can understand it. Right. Because it is, you know, I mean, the unknown is scary. And it's confusing, and we don't like that.
Absolutely.
So, you know, but you know, at the same time, we have to embrace that because we know that's just how we exist.
Of course. Otherwise, the boogeyman's real. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
If you can't put a name on it and you can't sort of explain it in a way that doesn't scare you, because I mean, the fact of the matter is that I tend to believe that there are, you know, there's a chance at least that there are beings out there that probably exist in the universe.
Oh, yeah.
I think you'd be kind of narcissistic to believe that there isn't something, you know.
Yes. I think that as a planet that, you know, I mean, just the diversity of life on our own planet.
Yeah, all the aliens that are living on our own planet, like octopus.
Exactly. You know. And just all of these things, and you know, and from the microscopic scale to what we are, you know, and the complex organisms, you know, like us and elephants and dolphins and even insects, you know, and there's such diversity in life that just by numbers, just by raw, pure numbers alone, you know, there has to be something else out.
What is that they say that like there's as many stars within our universe that there is grains in the sands of the beaches on Earth. There's as many universes as there is grains of sand.
Well, see, and that's the thing is we don't even know.
We don't even fucking know.
We can't even calculate that. We can't even try to understand it. We don't have a big enough camera to stand back and take a picture of everything.
Right.
Or even a small part of everything, you know?
Did you ever see that movie with, I think it was Matthew McConaughey, where it's the end of the world, and he gets in the spaceship and, like, travels to the edge of the universe to save the world?
Oh, no. Man, I wanted to see that.
Dude, it's so, like...
It was like The Astronaut or something
like that, man. But what was so great about it, man, was like of course, some of the storyline was a little wonky, but like the cinematography and the CGI, dude, just kind of made it really felt like, you're looking from the lens of being out in the great depths of the unknown. Do you know what I mean, man? And the way that they played with the dimensions of it, man. It was like, it's not just 3-dimensional. It's 4-dimensional, and it's really cool. It was a really, really good movie, man.
Yeah, that was one I meant to see, but just never got around to it. Yeah. So.
But cool.
Hey guys, don't forget to follow us on all of our social media platforms. We're very 21st century. We're on Instagram at What's Your Weird Story. That's WATSYER Weird Story. We're at Twitter. We're at What's Your Weird. We got a Facebook page. It's the What's Your Weird Story podcast Facebook page. Just remember that our your is your because we're folksy. And we also have a www.whatsyourweirdstory.com. That's www.whatsyourweirdstory.com. That's for all of your social media platforms. And those are ways you can contact us and set up an interview if you want to be part of the show. So look us up. Well, Barry, that's an awesome story. And that wraps up our visit to our hometown for now.
It was good to talk to Jessica. Haven't talked to her since, 1994 at least, man, when we graduated.
Yeah, it's not. Who knows? Yeah, I can't even recall. That was awesome. And I never heard that story, and it was perfect, and that's one of those things is that people are asking what kind of weird stories are you looking for? And that falls right in the bill. That's not one I was expecting.
For sure. Yeah, it's really kind of whatever is odd, like something that, it isn't your everyday sort of thing, that sort of falls in that realm of, ghostly encounters or, when we were first sort of talking about this stuff, a lot of stuff we were thinking of would be more on the UFO tip or
the spooky side.
But yeah, she kind of brought up that whole other side of what it's a weird story,
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's something that's odd. It's just unusual. It's not your everyday average story, and that's what we want to hear. Maybe you've got a weird job.
Yeah.
Maybe you've got a weird family member that you can tell us stories about your weird family member.
I've got plenty of those.
Barry, we can do a podcast on your dad alone. But, weird is a relative term. It's broad, and we want it to be broad. So, if you had a weird medical thing or you had, you went on a weird date with somebody who turned out to be a serial killer and you dodged that bullet. Yeah. We want to hear it. We want to hear it all. We want to hear all genres. We want to hear all your stories. And, you can contact us through our various social media outlets and email, and we'll have all that listed, and everything will be, we'll be easily gotten a hold of. So get a hold of us. As always, if you have a weird story, we want to hear it.
If you have a lot of them, we want to hear them all.
We can't do this podcast without your invaluable contributions.
Whether it's sharing your stories,
listening,
rating,
and spreading the word about the podcast. Thanks for listening. Until next time, be safe.
Be weird.
The stories presented on the What's Your Weird Story podcast are, to our knowledge, true experiences that our guests have had. We can't take the time to research all claims made, and besides, it's just